Well, welcome everybody. I appreciate you showing up. This is the breakout session, which is entitled The Evolution of Retail. And I see we're still waiting for a few more people to come in. But I'd like to thank our friends at Charter Title and Escrow for sponsoring this breakout session. Today we'll be dealing with a couple of really important topics that we're all interested in: the Marketplace Fairness Act and omni-channeling. We're all aware that retail, as we know it, continues to evolve, and today we've assembled an incredible panel of experts that will share with us their insights, and we're going to be able to ask them some questions, and we want to make this as interactive as we can. So as we're going along, certainly if you've got a question that you want to ask one of our panelists, just go ahead and raise your hand. I don't believe we have microphones out in the audience, but I think the room's small enough we should be able to hear you. My name is Jim Sadler. I'm the Senior General Manager at Westroads Mall here in Omaha. And I'd now like to introduce our panel, starting with Johanna Boston, who is the Director of Marketing for Nebraska Crossing Outlets and Taste Bud Technologies. So, Johanna, if you could tell us a little bit about what you do at Nebraska Crossing and with Taste Bud Technologies.
Yes, thank you, Jim. I'm pretty loud without it. Can you guys hear me?
There it is.
Okay. Good morning. Jim, thank you for having us here. I'm happy to represent Nebraska Crossing Outlets, Taste Bud, and also Crossroads Village. What do I do? Taste Bud Technologies, I am the Director of Marketing and Technology for our site. Taste Bud is a customization and personalization company, software company, founded by an MIT grad and NASA engineer. And I work with about 20 engineers that built the technology platform for Nebraska Crossing Outlets, including the beacon technology that we have placed in the center, and our digital app, all the way through to all of our digital marketing. So I oversee that. I'm kind of the liaison between ownership of Nebraska Crossing Outlets and my company. And so I design the strategy and implement the strategy for all of our marketing, and also I'm involved with the leasing of the property and Crossroads Village as well, utilizing our technology to take the risk out for the retailers that are looking to move into our market.
Awesome. I would just like to comment, the folks in back, we have extra seating up here. The seats aren't as expensive as the ones in back. If you want to move up, we've got plenty of seats up in front.
It's okay.
The next person I'd like to introduce is Mr. Mark Carson. He is the owner of Fat Brain Toys. And Mark, could you tell us a little bit about your company, Fat Brain?
Yeah, absolutely. So Fat Brain Toys, we're going on 13 years in business this year. Really started out as an online retailer initially, but I always kind of cringe when people just call me an online, online company, because we really have been making strides for a number of years now in a lot of different channels. From about eight years ago, we started developing our own line of products, and we wholesale those, really throughout the world today. We started a catalog about 5 years ago, so we have a circulation of a couple million there. And then we've got 2 brick and mortar retail stores as well. So really kind of living and breathing the omni-channel approach. And so I'm kind of happy to be here and talk about some of those topics.
Well, thank you. We're happy that you're here as well. Next, we have Scott Morey, who is an executive vice president with General Growth Properties, and I really have to thank Scott. Scott flew in from Canada last night amongst all of the weather that were happening, and we didn't know if he was going to make it or not. But Scott, we're happy to see you. Can you tell us a little bit about General Growth Properties and your role there?
I can, although you could do that too, I think.
I should be able to.
So
I would
probably do a better job than me. So General Growth Properties is the second largest owner of mall space in the U.S. We have 120 plus properties. We have 2 locally. But that's basically the space we're in. We've had a shift a little bit, an extension of our strategy, doing more core urban. So we have a handful of assets on Fifth Avenue in New York, and Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and Union Square in San Francisco, and other places. So my role there is I'm in charge of marketing, customer experience, and technology, which is very consumer focused, which is what really the panel is today. And that's evolved over time in a way. So I think it's unique that we've aggregated the three things in one place, but I think the market sort of demands it relative to what's happening with the retailers and the consumers. So.
Next, we have one of my favorite department store managers, Michelle Olson. She is the Yonkers department store manager at Westroads Mall. And Michelle, tell us a little bit about being a department store manager, what that involves.
Well, I've been a department store manager for 21 years now, and all of those have been with Bonton. Where do I start with what I do? There's a lot of things that I do. Putting out fires is probably my number one job. But it's mainly customer service, the customer experience. We do employ over 200 sales associates throughout most of the year. During fourth quarter, it's well over 300. I'm in charge of all operational processes of the store and also the building maintenance, which is a full-time job in itself, and Jim can relate to that. But it's just different every day, and obviously I love what I do because I've stuck with it for such a long time.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. And finally, we have Mr. Jim Otto, who is the president of the Nebraska Retail Federation. And Jim, tell us a little bit about the Nebraska Retail Federation and what you do.
If it's okay, I'll stand up so I can see you all better. Thank you, Jim. Jim Sadler is a former board member of the Nebraska Retail Federation. I've been with the Federation for about 13 years. It's been around since about 1954. We're kind of a best-kept secret. We probably don't toot our own horn enough. But basically what the Nebraska Retail Federation does is represents retailers with government, whether that be a local, state, or federal government. Primarily, we deal with the Nebraska legislature on issues that are important to retailers. Some of those in the past, it seems to be growing in popularity that the point of sale is the place to collect everything, and we're always trying to fight that because we're concerned as the customer goes and checks out, whether that be online or at the store, they get the amount and then there's 3 or 4 taxes added, and we're always trying to control that. Some of the things we've done in the past in Nebraska, gift cards no longer become unclaimed property if you handle them right. They used to become unclaimed property if they were not used. Now you never have to send that to state treasurer. That's a direct result of our efforts. We've worked on unemployment insurance because that was unfair to retailers and gotten some of that changed. I see some people in the audience that might care about stormwater fees and impervious surface. We were part of the coalition that pretty much got that stopped in the legislature. We're working right now to increase the amount retailers receive for collecting and remitting sales tax, and hopefully we can get something done on that maybe this session or next session. But our number one issue is absolutely marketplace fairness, and since we represent brick and mortar retailers, they may also have an online presence, but we represent brick and mortar retailers, and marketplace fairness absolutely needs to change if we're going to keep the competition fair between online and brick and mortar.
Well, Jim, as long as I've got you standing, maybe we can just start the discussion with you and tell us a little bit, what is the Marketplace Fairness Act and why is it so important to all of us in this room?
We need to go back a little ways, actually 20, 25 years. Presently, because of a Supreme Court ruling prior to the internet, prior to present computerization, it was ruled by the Supreme Court that it's too cumbersome for a retailer to have to collect sales tax for anyone they sell to across the United States. This was primarily catalog retailers at the time. But there's something around 5,000 different sales tax entities that have different sales tax levels. So the Supreme Court ruled way back then that it was too cumbersome to require the retailer to collect that for everyone in the United States. So the ruling now is that if you have a brick and mortar presence in a state, you have to collect and remit the sales tax. So every brick and mortar retailer in Nebraska has to collect and remit Nebraska sales tax. If you also have an online presence, you only have to collect in the state you have a brick and mortar presence. So if you're a Nebraska retailer and you only have a physical store in Nebraska, and you sell to anyone anywhere else, if they do not live in Nebraska, you do not have to collect and remit. The opposite is also true, and it's actually become a huge deal for online-only sellers, and the big one's Amazon. Amazon is kind of begrudgingly coming around, but presently, if you buy something from Amazon, they do not collect and remit sales tax in Nebraska because they do not have a Nebraska presence. So if we don't get this changed, and online-only retailers are going to tend to focus and it would seem to locate in states that have no sales tax. And so then they would not have to collect and remit anywhere. So what we really have is an unfair situation of if you buy something in Lincoln or Omaha for $100, you'll get it for $100 online and 107 at the brick and mortar store because of the 7% sales tax. So we're automatically giving 7%, at least in Nebraska, Lincoln and Omaha, a 7% advantage to someone who has no physical presence, doesn't hire anybody, pays no Nebraska taxes, does not support any community programs. I always say, I've never seen a sports team, a youth sports team, with Amazon on their uniforms.
That's a good one. What you know, we're well aware of the legislature moving back and forth on this. What is the status right now of the Marketplace Fairness Act?
Well, 2 years ago, it actually passed the United States Senate. Both Senator Johans and Senator Fisher voted for it. Then it did not get past the House. Now we have a whole new Congress. We have to start over. It's been reintroduced in the United States Senate. I'm sure Senator Fisher is still for it. I'm not sure where Senator Sass is. I haven't had the chance to talk to him. But we're starting over, and we're hoping that we can get it done. It's just so important.
Okay. Now, Jim, I know that you and your chairman, a good friend of mine, Ted Harris, the general manager at Oakview, went to Washington last year and personally lobbied some of our Nebraska elected officials. How did that trip turn out, and what did you take back from it?
Well, I thought it was a very good trip. I think Ted, I don't know how many of you know Ted, he's a great guy, but he likes to get things done. I think he came back thinking we'd actually get it changed, but he was a little frustrated with how slow things work. But as I say, then it was still Senator Johans and Senator Fisher, and they were both totally supportive. And then it was Congressman Terry, Fortenberry, and Smith, and although they didn't commit, Congressman Terry at the time was pretty supportive. Congressman Smith, I think, wanted to be supportive. Congressman Fortenberry was a long ways from being supportive. So if we want to reach out to somebody, I think it would be Jeff Fortenberry. And I do believe Congressman Ashford now is on our side, although I haven't specifically hit him up on it, but when he was in the legislature here, he was.
Oh, that's good to know. Good to know. Well, let's move down to Johanna. And Johanna, the topic of omni-channeling it's so broad, and to a lot of people, it's a new term. How would you define omni-channeling?
Yeah, sure. Omni-channeling, to me, is the new buzzword. It was multi-platform a couple of years ago, and now omni-channeling basically means all or universe. So we have to really be conscious of what our consumer, how they're responding to us, how they're communicating with us. And so it's all about looking at the devices that they're communicating with and basically being able to communicate back or personalize the communication between all of those channels. It's known that about 90% of people start off with one device and they end up purchasing on a different device. So I think it's something that we're moving into the future, and we have to be up on every device, not only your phone, your iPad, your desktop, all the digital platforms.
And how is your company, whether it's Taste Bud or Nebraska Crossing, how are they using this technology, the omni-channeling, to evolve that company?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. We have a beacon network. If you're familiar with iBeacons, we have a very large deployment of beacons in our center at Nebraska Crossing Outlets. They work directly with the firmware of your phone. And so we have the ability to know location, et cetera, if you opt into our network, which is our app. We're utilizing an app to speak with our consumer directly. We're not just geofencing someone or using Bluetooth. We're actually asking people to engage with our app. There has to be a value proposition there. So we're giving them something. We're offering them deals, value through our app and getting them to engage directly with us. So we're utilizing our app for that. We obviously speak with them via email blasts, blog, social media networks. We have to have a cohesive voice, but it has to be different depending on what channel we're speaking to them with. And it's all about moving forward, personalization, customization, again, two buzzwords, but overused, I believe, but we are actually doing that through our networking, and we are not just sending you offers that you don't want. We are making sure that we know what brands you have an affinity for, and then feeding you that data.
And I'll throw this one over to Scott. What is General Growth Properties doing in the area of omni-channeling and digital arena?
Let me frame it for a second and enhance a little bit on what Johanna said. So if we look at omni-channel in a way, we would look at the consumer's path to purchase. And if you went back, not that long ago really, if you're buying something online, it was pretty much one path to purchase online. And if you're buying something in stores, in physical bricks and mortar, it was one path. I was reading a Morgan Stanley research thing they did, or survey, or whatever you want to call it, and they effectively quantified it to 64 different paths of purchase. The permutations are probably even greater, because if we take any one of us in the room, we go through scenarios for every one of us for the exact same goods we're buying, whether it's apparel or something else, that we took a different journey. So a lot of this is about how you create this seamless kind of interaction cross-channel. So whether that's digital or whether that's bricks and mortar. And then, and I have to go down this path just to frame it, but we would take on a comparable basis sales in our space in malls and say 90% of those sales occur in bricks and mortar retailers. We would say, and we're really conservative by the way, I think, we would say 10% is through some other channel. We would argue 1% is catalog, 9% is online. Half of that 9% is from bricks and mortar retailers. There's always this confusion like we're getting overtaken by pure play online retailers. We're not. Bricks and mortar retailers own 95% of all the sales. So it's a fascinating kind of thing. And then you take it further, you talk about what's really going on and why now are more pure play retailers opening physical bricks and mortar stores. Every one of them are, actually, when you really look at it. It's really not a big surprise anymore, although a year ago it was. There's really two reasons, I think. One is when people like Warby Parker and Bonobos and Birchbox and Run a One Way and Big Bar and Steel and 11 James, I can keep going on, Tie Bar, on these pure play retailers, when they open a physical store, they of course make money in the store, but in the same trade area, online sales go up on a multiple basis, anywhere from 3 to 5 times. It's fascinating. A year ago, for the first time, and we knew this already, CFO of Macy's was very vocal, I forget which Merrill Lynch conference, I think in February last year. They say when Macy's closes stores in the same trade area, the exact thing happens, an opposite correlation. Online sales in the same trade area go down 2 to 3 times. So it's this fascinating what we call multiplier effect, when you can effectively not just do pure sort of cross-channel seamlessness, because I'd argue most retailers are still trying to get where they need to go, but the value in the physical bricks and mortar space relative to the other channels is real. So we call that the multiplier effect. The other one is that we know 2/3 of all online sales touch a physical store at some journey in the path to purchase. You know what is facts. So even if the sale doesn't occur in that 9%, there's still value in the physical space. So it's a fascinating thing. And then to go back, and I'll answer your question in a sec, sorry, but it's important to frame it.
No, you could.
But if you go back to the late 80s and you look at catalog at its peak, anyone know what it was? It's 10%. It's really interesting. So I don't want to minimize what's happening online. You go by category. If I go on, phones and electronics, of course, is probably one of the higher ones that are online. But the other one is people forget even on bookstores, which you think are gone. Only 40% of book sales are still online. Fastest growing city with bookstores opening right now in bricks and mortar is Seattle. I love that, by the way. Not that I have anything against the company there. But it's a fascinating time when you really look at it. So we look at that and say, how can we augment or help? How can we help drive productivity through retailers in some way? Or how can we better engage the consumer to put value and create more value in the physical bricks and mortar space? So to answer Jim's question, it's taken me 5 minutes. We've done a couple of different things. So one is about services. I could have human services, I could have digital services. Combination, that would be about 2 years back, we decided to help traditional bricks and mortar retailers do same-day delivery. We sourced a company very Uber-like called Deliv. We decided, this is pretty cool, maybe we'll do it without our brethren, but decided that was a mistake, so we pulled in Todman, Westfield, Simon, and Macerich. Made an industry thing, got 100 retailers, launched in 4 markets in 2013. We're in 12 and 14. You've got Macy's News. When Macy's doing the same-day local delivery, it's through the same infrastructure. So we look at things like that, or you go, that's kind of farther down the path to purchase because they've done it. You go upstream, looking at other ways we can do it, whether it's in the physical property to make visits better, so whether it's wayfinding, which is still complicated and shouldn't be in our space, and finding your way around, whether it's parking, whatever it may be. We're trying to take any barrier that a consumer would have that would not want to go to a bricks and mortar location and solve that, and then go on top of that and add services to the retailers and consumers to make it that much better, cross-channel. So we're all doing it, so whether it's Wi-Fi or beacons or retailer telecom or mobile apps or loyalty or payment or gift cards, or I go through a whole laundry list of things, all of us equally, I'd say certainly the top 5, top 6 mall guys, are all looking at the same thing and together trying to find ways to work with the retailers to further embed sort of the bricks and mortar retail in the consumer's journey. So,
Thank you. And I'd like to throw it over to Mark, who's obviously well ahead of the curve. Tell us a little bit about your company, Fat Brain Toys. How are you structured in this arena?
Yeah, and maybe I'll do the same with Scott, is kind of frame up my answer a little bit on that.
Sure.
I mean, one of my complaints, kind of, or observations of sort of this misnomer of what omnichannel is I think, so many companies, and I think a lot of this comes out of, the really massive ones who have these, tremendous legacy systems where they, treat it all as, it's all these siloed channels. And they say, oh yeah, I've got to have physical, and I've got to have, digital, and I've got to have catalog, but that experience across those is oftentimes lacking, and I see it all the time where we'll go into a store and it's almost like the store and the online are competing against each other, and that's really disappointing from a consumer standpoint. So what we've tried to do is for us is because we are small, because we're a little bit more agile, is try to blend those all together and make that really strive for that seamless experience across those. And a couple examples of how we're doing that is even when we opened our first store, our website is still that's a great sales point for us, and so we wanted to really reinforce that to every consumer that walked in our door. So we actually set up a really sort of a kiosk in the back of our store, right next to our point of sale, that would have bar stools and 3 iMac computers, so they could sit down. They could actually use a lot of the different sales tools on the website to kind of help to narrow their focus of what they wanted to search for in the store. And at the time, that was sort of a big expense, and my wife was questioning me, well, why do we want to do that? And said, no, trust me, I think consumers will do it. So it was one of those, is like, boy, I'm glad that worked out, because I would have heard about it for a long time. Exactly. But another one, and this is one I actually tried to do a little bit of research to find some stats on this prior to this, but our in-store pickup rate, I think I'm always shocked by it. During the holidays, we'll see up to 10% of our in-store revenue will be from pickup sales.
Wow.
And so they're, our consumers, it didn't happen overnight, but over time they realized that, we've got this great resource in this online presence, and they could, do their purchasing there and then just pick it up at their convenience. And that's even, taking in consideration that we'll ship it to their doorstep for $3.99. So they're still saying that it's worth it for me to walk in your store. I value that, and so those are just some things in that whole notion of showrooming, and we've just kind of canceled out some of that, and if nothing else, we see some reverse showrooming. So they'll come in and they're trying it on online and then coming in the store and seeing really what they want.
Well, what kind of advice would you give a smaller retailer that's just starting off? How would they get going on this, especially, you started it from the ground up?
Yeah, I mean, I think my best advice would be that same thing. Really, listen to your customers and find out what's important to them. And again, some of the big guys are so strapped with the legacy of what's already there that it's difficult for them to really tailor those solutions. And I think that's where the smaller guys can venture out on the thin ice and provide something that's very, very relevant to what their customers want. So I think it's just that they really got to listen and find those unique features and solutions that the customers are seeking.
That's great. That's great. Michelle, I wanted to ask you, what is Yonkers and Bonton? What are they doing as a department store in respects to omni-channeling?
Well, starting with a couple years ago, we finally got involved. I think I felt like we're kind of the last to get on board here, but everyone's concerned about brick and mortar, and honestly, this is a gift. It's like the icing on the cake for us with the omni-channeling. It's purely e-commerce, and our website obviously gets the biggest boost out of it. However, it does directly affect my store also, because I am a fulfillment store where I fill a lot of those orders. We've also done the in-store kiosk that you just heard about, although we really don't see a lot happening with that, so it's not, we don't get a lot of sales off of that, although people still do use it, especially in the smaller cities where we have stores. Customers do seem to use that a lot more than in the bigger. Also, we've always had an in-store ordering system that we could order for the customer if we didn't have the correct size, the correct color, or maybe we didn't even happen to carry the item. We could order it for them. And they've continually keep advancing that, and it's called Luffy. It's called Let Us Find It. So we offer that service to every customer that comes into our store. Even if they've found everything that they've looked for, we let them know that we offer the service. It has very minimal shipping. In fact, if it's $25 or more, it's free shipping. Also, we still have our shopping service hotline, and it's amazing the customers that still use that. You think with all the technology that there is, but we have an older client base that still uses that. They see something in the ad. Sometimes they'll call the store and order it. We'll send it to them. Otherwise, they call the 1-800 number on the back of the catalog and place the order. Also, in that whole process, I mentioned that we fill some of those orders. The biggest piece of it gets filled, though, through the vendors, and then we do have e-commerce DCs that fill a lot of those orders, and then we have 20 stores that fill them in store. I've been on that for about 18 months now, and it was scary at first because I thought, oh my gosh, we started in fourth quarter and it was huge. We couldn't even keep up with it. I mean, the customer is just going crazy online. But it's kind of leveled out a little bit, and so I was concerned that, maybe it's a trade in business, but honestly, it isn't. I would say it adds maybe 5 to 6% to my total store sales. I've never fallen below ever. And then as a total company, it adds a lot, but not, I would say maybe 10%. It's big and it's continually growing. And the demand is there, but it's very expensive to start that up and fund that, and that's why we've done, the in-store fills. However, we thought we would add more, but it seems to have leveled off, and so we're just going to keep the same 20 stores right now.
Okay. I'm curious, what departments within your store seem to be benefiting the most from this platform?
Well, I mean, we have, from every department is benefited. I mean, there's constantly, the orders print off in the morning. We go pick the merchandise, and there's merchandise from every single department that we pick. I would say the biggest ones would be cosmetics and shoes. Mm-hmm. Those are where we see the biggest boost, but every single department really benefits from all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to throw it out to the audience. Do we have any questions yet for the panel from the audience? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have one for Scott. Specifically, structuring when you identify the mix of products and services for a shopping center or retail space to put things together and costing all these things out. As we push all this technology forward and forward, how is it passed on so that we know in looking at things, understanding needs from a real estate standpoint?
That's a great question.
It is a great question. So there's a couple of ways, I'm going to answer that two ways, I think. So one is just talking about the retail mix in total. And we all know on average in any mall, 18, 15% of the tenants that are there move or change every year. So there's some organic thing already happening. So there's a lot of focus now. If you thought about, all was equal on financial terms, which retailer you can pick one over the other. We're very focused on their omni capabilities, both for their long-term success, but also for ours as well. And so that actually plays into it. And there's a company out of New York called L2, which most people don't know of. It's a great, and I don't get any kickbacks or anything like that. It's a research organization tied to NYU. And they're ranking every retailer from an omni standpoint. And it's really well done. A guy named Scott Galloway, and there's a great YouTube video called Four Horsemen that's actually pretty entertaining with him doing a speech. So that's the first answer. The second answer is that we view it as a cost of doing business. So we're ultimately like we were before, and we go decades back, you go decades forward. It's about how do we drive productivity? How do we drive volume in some way for the retailers? So we're doing these things with the intent of a longer-term play, meaning we think we have to do it in some cases as table stakes. Other cases we're experimenting with the intent of driving productivity. If we can in some ways, we'll get monetized at some point in the future. So is that fair?
And I believe there was a gentleman right behind you that had that question.
I have one that's going to be, I think, a little more tailored towards Joanna. You're very interactive with everything that's going on at Nebraska Crossing. How do you envision trying to market to people that may be wearing an iWatch? Because as the baby boomers' vision is changing, you get smaller than a smartphone, try to market to them, and everybody's sitting there trying to increase the size of the font. Are you looking at iPhones to be anything, or is it just going to be something?
Great question. The iWatch, obviously the device, the apps on it, as it's going to evolve, certainly the screen is much smaller. As far as how our app is interactive on it, we don't know that yet. We obviously are seen on the Apple and Android, both platforms. As far as speaking to the consumer, I think that people carry multiple devices. From my understanding, even with your iWatch, you will have to have your other device to do certain things. So that'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. But we're not really sure. We certainly can push a notification to you through your watch, and it'll come up like a text message as well. But again, until it's fully launched, it's definitely something that our technology team is looking at.
Do we have any other questions from the audience before we move on? Sir.
Scott, on your, you offer a platform, maybe refer to this in your earlier answer, but do you offer a platform for new tenants that might be coming in for the shopping center that they can pick from that might allow them to market in email?
Yeah, actually cross channels, I would say as well. So it's interesting on the marketing front. I almost feel like we operate like an agency, not just to the more regional or local retailers, but even in some cases to the national. And then we coming back to the app side, we have an app that's getting redone, whenever it get relaunched later this year, but we've got about a couple million people in total across the U.S. that are on that. But we're kind of taking a different strategy saying, it's interesting in some ways, interesting argument. In the same way there's limited real estate in the physical world, we have limited real estate on here. And there's an argument about who's going to win, right? And there won't be one winner, but there will be some winners. But no one, we all shop at who knows how many stores, but let's say I shop at a dozen retailers. I might have one of their apps on here or something else. So we're going with the approach of how do I establish building blocks of which anyone can plug into. So whether that was wayfinding, whether that was offers, whether that was events, whatever that may be, how do I establish building blocks? I don't assume everyone's going to go to my real estate on a device. And it's a fascinating conversation that we're having. It's actually really not just a conversation, it's occurring. The big retailers are taking the same approach. Because ultimately, we're in this together, and it's about how we drive volume. And so me assuming they're going to go to my app, I think, would be naive. But how can I have an app for consumers that want it, but build something that anyone else can plug into? And that would apply to the more local, regional retailers as well as the national guys as well.
There was another question? Sir?
Follow-up. Do you think that in lieu of the targeted hacking and the security issues, is that going to be another big area that calms people down at the consumer level and at the retail level as far as privacy and cybersecurity and what everybody does to prevent that so that there's integrity through these things besides just going to bricks and mortar with everything else that involves?
I would go, and Jenny, you could probably add to it too. I think the chips and pin thing is fascinating because I lived in London for a while. The only time I ever got hacked or my stuff got stolen was on a chip and pin 3 times in the UK. But anyway, don't want to minimize that. I know we're going down that path. I think mobile payment plays a big role into it. And I think that helps a lot in preventing those kind of situations. The retailers are still trying to catch up on their in-store equipment. Many cases, those legacy point-of-sale systems are 10 or 15 years old, and it's a lot of money for them to change them out. So they're going through that now, and I read something, an article a week or two back about Apple Pay, and it was something like 40% of retailers they thought were signed up aren't ready to actually accept the payment yet, but it's going to change with time. So I'm a big believer that the mobile payment will solve that. The other thing too, it's interesting to watch, but no one really thinks about. Follow First Data, right? First Data processes half of all the credit card transactions, debit and credit card transactions in the U.S. There's a lot of focus on the same space and how those guys branch out, not just First Data, but generically how they branch out and the services they provide, not just to the retailers, the consumers, not just to prevent those situations, but how to make the experience much more better and have tools that people can use. So.
I was going to ask Scott and Johanna this, but I'm going to ask Mark this about how can a developer help a smaller retailer with their omni-channeling presence? What would you expect a developer to provide for you to help you with in this new world?
Yeah, from a developer perspective, I've got a fairly low number of observation points on that. But I think there definitely are some things. I mean, if it's not easy to do online well, and so if there's things that plug and play systems that a landlord or developer, something that they can assist with that, or you can piggyback on top of what somebody else is doing. I think that's just a step in the right direction there. But there's just really so much that goes into that. So I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical that anybody can really provide the level that you really need to go to if you're going to be serious about omni-channel and really go to the degree that you need to go to be successful.
I'll just throw this out. If you want to see it being done right, go to Fat Brain Troy's website. It's really well done. It's exceptional. And I'll throw it back to Johanna and Scott and say, what can you provide? What can you help with to get a smaller retailer, not a national, but a smaller retailer on board?
Okay, that's a little more challenging because I'm dealing with the national retailers.
Yeah.
But I do actually want to go to national retailers and address that real quick. That's part of what I do. I travel to the cities where our retailers are housed, the corporate CMO, CDOs I'm dealing directly with. We are a little unique because Nebraska Crossing Outlets we're an independent, so we have 2 owners, and so it allows us a lot more freedom on some level. It doesn't give us the power behind a GDP, but it certainly definitely gives us that ability to get in front of those people. And I have relationships with our top retailers that I deal with, and they're all really reaching out for help. They're all fighting for the same dollar. They know that they are behind the learning curve on omni-channel marketing or just even finding their unique, loyal customer out in the world. They know that they're fighting for the same dollar. I sat with Brooks Brothers last week and, with their head of marketing. And they're reaching out and saying, we need help, and what can you do for us? So I think that in a situation where I come from, we have the ability to be a laboratory for that retailer, whether it's a small retailer or a larger retailer, and show them how speaking directly with their consumer, giving them what they need, modeling that person. We all know that the shopper in New York City, the shopper in Dallas, Texas, the shopper in La Jolla, California, are all different people than the people in the Midwest as well. So gone is the day of, I'm looking for female 25 to 54. That doesn't exist anymore. We have behaviors that obviously, if you're a Brooks Brothers shopper, there's a lifestyle component that actually matches up. But we are looking at that person, where that retailer happens to be, and we are modeling that person and actually searching out that same person in our trade area so that we can actually bring them into the store. And then, of course, it's up to the retailer to convert them into a loyal consumer. So I think it's very relevant that a developer can help. It costs a lot of money. That's why a lot of them are not doing it. And certainly it's a lot of time. But I think it's going to be the new norm eventually. And I'm sure that Scott has, his opinion on this as well, that I think that it's going to be a landlord situation maybe at some point. You're not going to want to have 75 apps on your phone, or can you house 75 apps on your phone to go shopping? So, as far as our app being relevant on our property, it's something that definitely people are looking for and receptive to. And if you look at a large retailer or a large app company like Retail Me Not or Shopkick, who have, I don't know, you could probably quote the number on how many millions they have on there. If you look at a local app that has 200,000 people on their app, that's a higher concentrated number of people who are actually using it in a demographic area of our size.
It makes sense.
So I'm jumping in now. A couple things, actually. The hard part for us on being the main point of entry online is we do not want to get between the relationship between the retailer and the shopper. And it's tricky, right? So the moment you do that, if you take the Amazon approach and you want to do a return, it complicates it, right? And it's not good for anyone, actually. The stronger the relationship with the retailer, the better it is for anyone. So not to say that it's not going to happen. There's some interesting models. There's a woman, I'm forgetting her last name, first name is Heather, with a company called Shoppable out in New York, is the first online branded kind of marketplace for apparel, where I think she's figured out how to sell something online without getting in the middle of that relationship. So it's kind of a fascinating one to watch. But I think going back, Jim, what you're trying to ask is, Mark, what's going to take for you to rent space with us? I think that's really what Jim wanted to say, and he just couldn't say it. So we were like giving you every opportunity to tell us what to do. But I think we look, and this is not in your case, you take earlier stage companies, you go back a dozen years when you started. We're trying to find those companies, and in many ways, they have shorter term leases. And there's an industry term we use typically called temporary tenants. It's the wrong way. It's about an incubator space. So I find these great early stage companies, and how do we help them all the way through, right? And that's kind of the mentality that we're trying to take and find those companies earlier on, or even companies like yourselves, and you're well far advanced, but to bring them in a way and add certain services. So some of that we do now, like I talked about, actually all the mall guys are starting this now. Retail or telecom, make it really just move in. You have to deal with the telecom because we can do it faster and cheaper than anyone else can. And there's other services kind of for earlier stage retailers that we're looking at providing as well. And then I have one, I have to go down this path, sorry. I'll be really short. I have to talk about traffic, actually, because it maddens me kind of in a way. We talk about sort of how it gets, I think, misconstrued. Mall traffic for B plus and A malls is up. It's fascinating. It's a fact, actually. No one ever talks about it, or pretty rarely. With the interesting part, it's not to say that traffic isn't down. They're visiting less stores. If you go back 5 years ago, they were visiting on average, my numbers are up, at 5 stores. Shoppers today are averaging about 3 stores per visit. Doesn't mean mall traffic's down. Conversion up and sales is up, which explains why in B plus and A malls you're seeing the numbers go up over time. But it's a fundamental shift in behavior, which Mark alluded to earlier, and John as well. 80% of people now are pre-online before they go and shop. It's very intentful, actually. It's not a behavior. I remember a year ago when Shopper Track came out and said, traffic was down 15.5%. We're scratching our heads like that's not ours. We, of course, weren't happy about that. We had retailers calling us not happy about it. We said it's really about a shift in consumer behavior. And how do we engage them in a way to further drive volume and value for that space? Now, I'd go in Mark's case, everyone else's, whether it's in your store, in the same trader, you don't really care. We're happy to drive the volume kind of either way. But, traffic in B plus and A malls almost everywhere is up, actually. And it never gets that. So when retailers have issues on their revenue for a quarter, they always blame mall traffic. Never give us credit when they're up. It's fascinating. Just saying, right? Just saying. But it's a really interesting thing that's really the core in many ways of what's happening, with the omnichannel world.
All right. Oh, yes, please.
Just going to agree with you there. It's really interesting to see how conversion has gone up, and I think that's very relevant that Scott mentioned that, even if your traffic maybe falls a little lower, your conversion's higher and your sales are higher. So people are doing the research online. They are very habitual in how they shop maybe. They're looking at the best deal. They're looking at what they have. And then at the end, the end user ends up, going to the store, wanting to feel the fabric, wanting to try it on and purchasing it at the store.
Once again, I'll turn it back out to the audience if we have anybody that's got a question that's come up. Yeah, sir, way in the back.
I have a two-part question for Scott. First part is, how have online sales impacted store size for retailers? Seems like 18,000 is the new 25,000, 3,000 is the new 5,000. And the second part is, are retailers doing more in-store activities such as entertainment or education or something to provide more than just buying experience?
It's a great question, actually. I think everyone's playing with formats still. I don't think anyone's really figured it out. You can see, for example, the days of a retailer going and opening 1,000 plus stores across the U.S. is not going to really happen again. I think there's clearly some level of consolidation that's happening on the retailer side as far as the number of stores they have. But they're all playing with trying to figure out what the right format is. And you've got this, couple different theories about that. One's sort of this hub and spoke by market, where I take one big, giant kind of flagship location that's got a lot of merchandise. I could use that for sourcing goods locally to deliver. And then sort of smaller formats within that area, and we're seeing some retailers doing that. We're seeing some that are going, like on the apparel side, there's always this debate about Bonobos and Andy Dunn and what he's doing, and where they've got no inventory in the store. And there's some big name retailers, traditional ones in the apparel, that are experimenting with that. So I don't think there's any one right answer yet, but you are seeing, I think you're correct, you're seeing some go up in footprint, you're seeing some coming down, you're seeing some that are kind of doing both. But there's nothing conclusive that we're seeing. And I'm forgetting the second part of your question. Thank you. The experience one is interesting. What we call as an industry experience in many cases is a service. So I reread a book I read 10 years ago called The Experience Economy, and they actually try to put the math behind really what that looks like. And if you take things like Apple, Build-A-Bear, Nordstrom, and I'm leaving another one out actually in a second, what is that really? Like Build-A-Bear is fascinating, really, right? It's done really well the last couple of years, and certainly numbers in the last year have been quite strong. Those are very distinct and different, experiences. So I think like doing a single event, whether it's in a mall or in a store, is not enough to move the needle. So it's got to be something that's more integrated into the format, whether that's at the mall level or the store level, to fundamentally change behavior and engage people in a way that's unique. And I think that's what's going on today.
Do we have another question out there? Yeah, Wendy.
Well, the best part about being in marketing is I can't really answer your questions, so they're also public, but I'll do my best. If you go back 4 years ago in GGP, we had 70 open, right, locations like that. We only have 4 left or something. So we're fortunate because of our size and the location, it's a little cliche, but it's true, in the location type of properties we have, it's easy for us to figure that out. The Sears one specifically, it's not the first time, right? A couple years back, we did the same thing. So I think if Sandeep was here, who's our CEO, and Michael Berm, our CFO, it's all about finding the upside. It's not about Sears, it's about looking at the portfolio and finding where we think there's embedded growth and using our capital in the most productive way. And I think that's really what, this recent transaction was as well.
I promised Jim Otto I'd get this question in because we were talking about it earlier about you always see when different issues come up about you should write your congressman, and I was talking to Jim about that and the importance of that. Can you address that, Jim?
Well, yeah, thank you. A lot of people think it's really not worth it. I shouldn't write my congressman, or that it's not going to do any good. It's kind of like saying voting doesn't do any good. But one email, one letter, one phone call probably does some good. But if they get several hundred emails on a specific subject, it definitely makes a difference. And so there's no question about it that if you can, it is very important if you to contact your congressman, your state senator, your city council person. If it's a government issue, government is run by those who show up. And if you can show up several ways, but if you don't show up, you're not going to get your position paid attention to. And I would take this opportunity to add the fact that to brick and mortar retailers, legislatively, I truly feel that marketplace fairness is the #1 issue. And the second issue to brick and mortar retailers legislatively is marketplace fairness. And the third most important issue to brick and mortar retailers legislatively is marketplace fairness. Because as online sales grow, I wanted to make this other point. If you are a brick and mortar retailer in Nebraska, you also have to collect sales tax on your online sales in Nebraska. A lot of people think all online sales, you don't collect sales tax. Any brick and mortar retailer in Nebraska collects in-store sales tax, and online sales. So if you shop online at Target, you're going to pay sales tax because there's pretty much a Target store in every state, but not true at online-only retailers. So I'll shut up with that.
No, you're good, good. And Michelle, I just wanted to ask you real quick, what are you so excited about that's upcoming with your store, your company in the area of omni-channeling? What really gets you going?
Well, the next phase of the whole process is this whole buy online, pick up in store.
Yeah.
We're already seeing, not huge increases, but, extra dollars from the online and the store fill. However, if they were to come in store to pick up their order, they're definitely going to see or walk by something else that they're going to buy. So not only am I getting the sale from the online purchase or order, I'm going to get another sale from them being in the store. So it's even more sales growth for us.
And you're getting the sales tax.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are. Yes.
Good girl, good girl. Just one more thing. Were there any more questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Jim, can you quantify the loss to the state in revenue in terms of online sales? And
Oh.
I guess to piggyback on that, is that expected? If this passes, is that going to help brick and mortar overall? Or are we going to see a dip in online sales because of that?
Great question.
You're talking about how much more sales tax would Nebraska collect if we had it? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All over the board, there are estimates. If you ask the opponents of marketplace fairness, one being former Governor Heineman, he had the State Department of Revenue estimate the loss. It was somewhere between about $42 million a year. According to the people who are supporting marketplace fairness, they say that in 2012 is $180 million for Nebraska.
Wow.
So the estimates are all over the board and really not going to know until It's actually starting to be collected. And that brings up another point as to what the opposition is. In DC, the opposition, or at least part of the opposition, is the last thing you want to do is give these states this money because they'll just spend it on more programs. So if you really want smaller government, you can't allow government to have the money. So that's one of the arguments against it, at least in Washington. So one of the things we've done in Nebraska is there's a bill this year that was introduced by Senator Davis, LB 200, which just and it's now out of committee and gotten speaker priority, so we hope it will be passed, and we could certainly use your support on it. But what it says is, if marketplace fairness passes on the federal level, Nebraska will use that money to lower property tax. It will not go to new programs. So the reason for that bill, and that's happening in several states, is to assure the federal representatives that if they vote for marketplace fairness, they're actually voting for tax reduction in their own state. So, thank you.
Great point, great point. I see that we're just about out of time. I want to make sure that everybody understands that if you are interested in having representation in the legislature, Jim is going to be around. He would love to talk to you. If you are a retailer that needs a little help in the omni-channeling arena, Johanna, I'm sure, would love to talk to you and give you a hand. She's local, she's available, and obviously an expert. I'd like to thank the Charter Title and Escrow for sponsoring this, and I would especially like to thank Aaron Pogge and the Learner Company and the committee for putting this on and allowing me to moderate this. It's been a pleasure. Please, if you would help me thank the panel for coming today.